My name's Treb. I have been in the internet world for about 20 years. I've just finished with my third startup. I was early on in the first two and then started two cloud companies myself, Sitesmith and OpSource, both which we eventually sold to large telecoms. I'm beginning my fourth journey right now. I don't have even a full name for it yet, but I'm very excited to get back into the creative process of putting together new products and a whole new company around that. I've had successes and failures in all of my companies. It's amazing. You know, it's so easy to see people go out there and start a company and go ballistic like a Facebook or an Uber, but much more likely for those of us who do this all the time, we'll see failures even within our companies. You know, even some of the most successful companies don't have the right product out of the gate. And Google had no idea how it was going to make money for the first 3 years of its existence. And in going through that process is definitely something that you need to learn from. I always recommend for someone who wants to start their own company or their own organization or do something new, go to work for another startup. Maybe one that doesn't have to do exactly the same thing you're going to do, but the ebbs and flows of how a company grows and how to get the right people, how to get financing, how to build markets are really something that's best learned by experiencing it and seeing that firsthand. And so if you can get in early at another company and see that, you'll be much better prepared when you want to go do your own company. It used to be you would launch a product, you know, usually in the US, and then we would move into Europe and then eventually Asia. And now, with the way the internet and the cloud works, anybody can buy your product anytime, anywhere. If it's set up the right way, and we'll talk a lot about frictionless sales later, but how to create an environment where anybody can come buy you at any time, you'll see a dramatic adoption in really any region. It starts becoming almost inconsequential what country you're in. Matter of fact, one of my favorite and big frustrations about doing international business is people will come in and they say, well, how do we set up in my country, whether it's Belgium or Switzerland or even Luxembourg, what you have in the US? And I said, you're thinking about this the wrong way. If we in the US didn't start in the US, if we thought it was cheaper, we'd put it in the Philippines. We don't really care what country it's in, we care how people can buy and use the products. In our most recent product, we did a cloud product that you could buy online and you could get compute resources, very wonky, geeky stuff, for pennies, even fractions of a penny an hour, use it online and stop using it. And when we put that out there, almost immediately about 65% of our client base was not US. They were companies in India, Thailand, just an amazing breadth across the world, Egypt even, where they were using these resources that we hadn't specifically targeted them, but because it was made available on the web on a global basis, anybody who wanted to could buy it, and we didn't really put up any of those barriers or any of that friction to keep them from using it. I really think more about who you're selling to. It's amazing. I had to go to this listening class, and I always come back to this because in this listening class, they told us that the average person checks their mobile phone 150 times a day. And I thought that was really funny because I was thinking about my daughter who's 17, is a cute girl, very attractive. And I said, she checks her mobile phone only once a day, from the minute she wakes up for the rest of the day. She never puts it down. And you look at this generation of users, really anybody under the age of 30, and technology, they're so connected into technology that it's a 24-hour day experience. I mean, she uses technology 10 times more than I did when I was 17 years old, and I was a founding member of the computer club. I was a geek, and here she is, a cheerleader, and she's just inundated with this all the time. Yet we still treat people when we're trying to sell them like they don't know anything, like there's no experience, that they need to have a salesperson go out and talk to them. And I think you need to understand, and here's a group of users who have certain expectations, right? That a technology will always be available, they can get it anytime, they're gonna get it in mobile, they don't need to talk to people. Doesn't mean they don't wanna talk to people sometimes, but they don't need to talk to people to find out. And if you put barriers in between yourself and them, and so they can't find you on the internet on their own and adopt you on their own without going through a big process, you're gonna lose that generation of users. The good thing is that generation of users cuts across cultural lines much more than any past opportunity to sell. When you look at guys my age, selling to someone in the United States who's 50 is much different than selling to someone in Asia who's 50 or selling someone in Europe who's 50. We all have different expectations, right? Americans are very blunt. We like to have a lot of price discussions. Obviously, a lot of other countries have much more relationship pieces. Really, when you look at a 25-year-old buyer, though, this generation of cloud, they pretty much are all the same thing. They just want to go online and buy something, right? And they don't want to have to go through all that. But once you do reach them, you don't really have to have separate messages. We don't see that the 25-year-old buyer in India is really that much different than the 25-year-old buyer in Indiana. I'd say right now, look at what you sell and how you sell, and can I, as your client, find it, understand it, and start using it online. If you really can't do that, if you're forcing them to have a telephone conversation or meet with someone, you're really not going to be able to compete in the global markets. It's not that people don't want to talk to someone in your company, but if so many users now, if they're looking for a service, if they want a digital media service, for example, and help me understand my next set of presentations, and I want a company who's going to help build that for me. And I start off, my first thing I do is I'm going to go look on and do a web search. If I can get all the information and try something out with company A, who's based anywhere, and I have a company D in Derry that makes me talk to someone, or I have to go through a long process, I'm just not going to do it. I'm going to just go to a company and stop. So think about your business and think about how easy it is for someone to find you, how easy it is to understand what you sell, and how you take that complexity of what you do and simplify it so they can understand the message. And if they want to try you, how easy you do to make them to try you without having to go through a bunch of discussions. If you can do all of those things right, it doesn't matter if you're in Derry. It doesn't matter if you're in Derry or in Denver. For the user, they're going to have the interaction with you through that online experience, and that's going to drive how they feel about you as a company. You don't have to be in a specific location. The good thing about that Ireland as a whole has for it, Northern Ireland is, of course, that it's always said as that kind of juxtaposition between the U.S. and Europe. The language is a huge advantage. The ability to be able to transact in English, most people buying will expect at least an English capabilities on there. Most, especially technical people, will be able to converse on it in English. And so that's a humongous value to the organizations. You understand, first, the primary language of the web, and the second piece is a good kind of cultural understanding back and forth between those two areas. But you will want to look as you expand, if you want to hit specific markets, about how you can then not just use, even simpler put than not using English, is using local currencies, and understanding that there is sometimes a desire for someone to buy in their own native currency and the ability to put that forward. And then you start thinking about, next is languages. And can they interact with you in their language of choice? Especially if you're doing more creative endeavors. Technical people are fairly comfortable using English for most projects, but people doing more creative items tend to look at things in more of their own language. So you'll need to address doing it in in-country language. I think the last piece really is actually needing in-country resources. You can do much of that centrally. You can still translate, you can do multiple currencies from one location, but if you're interacting with someone on the web, they're not really expecting you to go put someone in their country, and you can really still do that from here from Derry.